Guru Nation, welcome back to another episode. This is not just for YouTube, this is for the podcast. We've got Savannah Erickson from Veeva Systems. Um, we're going to discuss a lot of things. Some of them are a little bit controversial, which, Savannah, I'm really glad you're passionate on this topic. Site empowerment. Okay, it's not that often that somebody leaves the site level and it moves on, in your case, to Veeva, which is an industry vendor, probably the biggest vendor in the industry, and still discusses site empowerment. So you definitely have not sold your soul out to the other side. You're site
Not yet.
centric. Yeah,
Not
that's
yet.
good. We need that. We need that. So before we get into the actual episode, I wanted to talk about Veeva. Thank you, Veeva. Veeva's a sponsor of this show. Veeva Site Vault. It's amazing. First of all, it's free. Second of all, they're playing the long game where they know that if they empower sites to do their jobs better, they're going to make their money on the back end, and that comes from sponsors. Um, they already monetize primarily off of sponsors and no one else. So they never plan on selling sites anything. It's free tools. Right now it's eReg. It's called Site Vault. If you've been sitting on the fence about switching your ISF electronically, wait no further. Veeva Site Vault, it's free, it's easy to do, and you're gonna get to dabble in the future of the industry. And if you don't switch, they're going to make you switch at some point. Sponsors are going to just start mandating eReg at some point, I predict. So you might as well have your own plan and your own process. And Viva is also good at helping sites with their SOPs and things like that. So Viva Site Vault, check it out. Electronic regulatory. Get yourself modernized. Savannah, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
So let's go. Like, I know you started as a research assistant before you became a coordinator, before you became more of a director at the same site, it looks like, right?
Yeah, so it was two different sites, but they're now part of the same site umbrella. But that
Okay.
happened after I had left the site world.
Okay, I gotcha. And those were in Atlanta, right? Atlanta.
Yep.
And you're still based in Atlanta.
Yes.
So let's go before that. Okay, before you started as a clinical research assistant, what'd you do? How did you even discover this industry? Like, and most people they just stumble into it on accident.
Yeah, that's sort of what happened. So I had gone to school for psychology, I got my master's. I really wanted to go back and get my doctorate at some point, but I wanted to beef up my CV. So I started just looking for jobs in research. I was really more looking for like academic research, to be honest, not necessarily clinical.
Why?
Um, why?
Yeah, I want to get into the thought process because people are still thinking that way
I
too.
know. Well, actually, I didn't really know that clinical research existed.
Mm.
And my whole background and my schooling and all my professors were like, you need to write thesis after thesis, you need to do research papers, you need to get grants, like you need to get all that experience. And that's pretty much what you do when you get your PhD, like you're basically just doing research and writing about it and trying to get published. Um, but I found this clinical site, and my background is in psychology, so they specialize in a lot of those CNS
Ooh,
indications,
nice.
like so exciting for me.
We probably
Um,
work on some of the same studies.
oh yeah, I do recognize now that that's not across the board what all sites work on. Like coming out of the site world, it's so interesting and kind of reflective for me to look back at what I was doing, what it actually meant, and like big picture type stuff. But yeah, so I got the job as a research assistant and just kind of worked my way up, and then I realized like I really like this and I'm actually kind of good at it, so I'm not gonna go back to school.
Good for you. I think there was an article in, I think it was Stat News, I did like a full podcast on it where there's like this exodus from academia amongst new postgrads, like younger postgrads. Um, and yeah, I mean they're finding private industry much better for their career needs.
Well, it's hard to get into, like if I were going to go back for my PhD, you're basically applying for a job interview. You're applying amongst like 10 other people. If you and the professor that you're applying to don't, mesh, or you don't have similar research ideas, or you don't want to work on the project that they're working on, then like that's it, you're done. And there are so many schools in the country that offer PhD programs and the specific program that you want. It's crazy competitive.
Yeah, I think I mean, we can go on forever about this topic, but we won't. But I think there's a little bit of inauthenticity when it comes to academia, specifically as it pertains to compensating and retaining talent. There's
Yeah.
sort of like this idealistic notion that we're in the pursuit of science and that should be enough for you. And I mean, what the majority of the people working there, yeah, they love science, but they also need to make a livable wage for their
They also like
degrees.
to live.
Yeah, they
And
also like to live. That's a good one. Okay, so what did you at the site? Okay, you did CRA or clinical research assistant, then clinical research coordinator, then site director, all at the same company relatively quickly. So I'm guessing it was like a small to mid-sized site that kind of grew as you were there. Is that correct?
so the first site I was at, we did a lot of studies. Like we were pumping out probably 100 something.
100.
Yeah, like we were crushing it. Like you want to talk about an efficient site experience.
Wow.
Yeah, like my most active time as a coordinator, I had 16 active studies.
How many coordinators were at that site that was
Um,
doing 100?
and it varied, probably anywhere between 10 to 15 at a time.
Wow. And what, like 3 PIs or so?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
roughly.
That's a good amount. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
at 6 right now with my new site, and it's tough, but I can definitely see growing quickly because the studies are out there, especially right now in this time that we're in.
yeah.
Um, so you got it from clinical research assistant to coordinator to lead coordinator to ClinOps lead,
Hmm.
and this was about a 5-year period that you did all this, which is relatively quick actually.
It felt that way.
Like what made them promote you, or were you like kept asking for growth and for new responsibilities, or did they see
Yeah,
something in you?
I think a little bit of both. I'm I'm pretty ambitious, and I've really, like I said, I liked it. I was good at it. I could multitask. I could prioritize. Um, I was handling my workload that they were giving me. Um, and yeah, I wanted to be in that leadership role to kind of groom other coordinators to meet that and just continue to build our site into this conglomerate of
So
research.
I'm guessing at some point you managed CRCs as like a lead, right?
Yeah, so I was a CRC supervisor, so I worked with our project manager
Hmm.
on kind of managing the coordinators.
So how did you, because this is something I've struggled with a lot. And the only way I know how is just to be super nice to my staff, like really nice. I mean, my wife says I could be a pushover at times, and I lack the ability to discipline coordinators. I think I'm getting better at that, but like, how did you manage? Because at some point, like, you bring on a new coordinator, they're super excited for about a year. You can start compensating them better. That's one of the benefits of being at a private site.
Yeah.
Compensation generally matches like your work. But at some point, like the honeymoon period's over, and they're looking at you like, oh, another study. How do you get through that like wall? I don't know if I'm even articulating it right, but do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I think that my sites, and again, coming out of it and looking back at my experience has been really reflective. I think my site experience is probably a little bit different than what other site experience looks like, in that my sites, because of the volume we were doing, it was sink or swim. So either you were going to move up and you're going to do good and you were going to, handle your patient load and like get your stuff done, or you weren't.
What does that mean? You weren't, they're gone?
I mean, like, yeah, you couldn't
Wow.
hang. You had to go.
Wow. So, yeah, but how could management afford that? Because like it's so hard to get a coordinator trained, right? Like a new one.
Well, so that's where we benefited from having research assistants. Like
Oh,
me working as a research assistant, I was working directly with my coordinator. And I think that also helped me. I was paired with really great coordinators in the industry. I think they've moved on to various like leadership levels at vendors and things as well. So I just had like I got kind of lucky, I think.
so basically, you didn't really need to motivate staff because they were already like the internal culture of the company was doing that on its own.
Sort of, yeah. Which admittedly is not great. But when it came to getting experience in clinical research, and if that's what you wanted out of
Mm.
that job, you were 100 million bajillion% getting that experience. And
Did the company have a lot of turnover?
um, I guess I mean I don't know any more than any other company.
Oh, okay, so
The
about
industry,
typical.
this industry as a whole has a lot of turnover.
Huge turnover. Huge turnover. So before we get into your career at Veeva, because I'm curious to see why you made that jump. Um, helping manage CRC workload. I mean, 100 studies, let's say you're in charge of 16. That's a lot of things to keep in mind. That's a lot of time management skills, figuring out how to balance work-life balance, um, setting boundaries, prioritizing, I mean, everything. Like how can a CRC, let's say they're a coordinator now, how can they do this? Like some are having problems doing that with just like 3 studies.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, you have to know which studies are priority, right? Like every site has those sets of studies where they know these are what our big enrollers are going to be. These are probably not going to be super heavy enrolling. We're an add-on site for this study, things like that that you need to consider when you're managing your patients and your studies and monitor prep and inspection readiness and things like that. From there, I think you then go by like how many patients are in each study, and the ones with the most you probably need to focus a lot more on because it's a lot more to juggle, and the ones with the least you can maybe let EDC go a day over.
More than
Maybe
that.
yeah, maybe you don't answer that query right away,
Mm,
but um yeah, just figuring out like, all right, I'm gonna stay late on this day, or maybe I'm gonna come in on like a Saturday morning and just knock this out so that way I can start fresh that week.
mm. Yeah, I'm thinking about my CRC. She's new. She's about 6 months, 6 or 7 months into it, and she's getting the hang of it really well. Desiree, and she actually asked me this question about 3 months ago. Like, hey, I have all these monitors because she had 4 studies at the time. I have all these monitors asking me, everything's urgent. Every monitor says their thing's urgent. And then the in-house CRA is also asking me things and they're urgent. And then the PI wants stuff and the patients want stuff. And it's like, she actually asked me, how do I prioritize? Like, how do I know what's actually important versus what's not? And what I told her was, patient safety's first priority. So anything involving patient safety directly, that's first. And then you go by basically what you said, studies. And so she didn't know which studies were important. So I explained to her, these are the ones, you need to focus on right now. So everything else can wait. It's basically the same advice, but it's good to hear from someone else.
Yeah, I would definitely say if your PI is asking you for something, you probably want to get that first.
Yeah, especially
And
if
then
he's
maybe trickle down.
especially if he or she's the person responsible for agreeing to do future studies with you. Okay, so there's two ways we can go here. We came to a fork in the road.
Hmm?
I think we're going to stay on the topic of operations real quick
Sure.
before we get into more controversial stuff. So, preparing for and conducting monitoring visits.
Hmm.
So, as somebody who's dealt with, I mean, if you guys had 100 studies, like that's 100 monitors coming in every 4 to 6 weeks. Like, you guys basically had a monitor on site, multiple monitors on site every day.
Yeah, every day.
So, did you guys cater lunch for them, or what'd you do?
We did have I learned from the monitors that our monitoring suite was really nice because we had like a whole, because our facility was off of an old hospital. So there were lots of like nooks and crannies that were untouched. And so we had a monitoring suite, those essentially like a doctor's office sort of little hallway thing. So they had their own room, they had privacy. Um, but when it came to monitoring visits, we had very specific procedures as a site that we followed. So we had an internal quality department, sort of like your probably internal CRAs. So as a coordinator, you're working very closely with that quality assurance coordinator on what the status of your source is and what your patient binder looks like. And then we had a regulatory department that handled all the regulatory binders for us.
I
So
see.
making sure that those were, up to date and things like that. And then we would have morning meetings every single day that reviewed who was baselining today, who is screening today, who's admitting to our inpatient facility today, who's discharging today, what
Wow.
monitors we have today, what monitors do we have next week, and just started preparing kind of like a week or so in advance of those monitoring visits. And then that becomes your priority as a coordinator.
I'm curious, was this site um connected to a private practice or was it
No,
independent?
we are independent.
So all the patients are coming from the community, from the site's own database, but
Yep.
not from like the patient's provider.
No, we had our patient population was pretty low income. So we worked a lot off of word of mouth too, because they're getting paid for this site. They're getting treatment that they're probably not getting
Yep,
otherwise, which
yep.
is a huge benefit to them as people and like seeking healthcare. So I mean, we had tons of friends and family and
Wow. Yeah, CNS, I know that space really well, actually. Okay, that makes sense. And then you had to have a lot of raters, psychometric raters, and somebody like you with advanced degrees. I bet you did a few. Did you do any rating? You have a
I
master's.
did towards the end of my
Yeah,
stint.
I figured.
Yeah,
We actually have we're
that's
getting a
great.
new MDD study. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I got a new neurologist slash psychiatrist here, and I was completely honest with the sponsor. Hey, he has no experience as a PI, but he's a sub-I on all these internal medicine studies, and I have 18 years of CNS experience. I could be a rater. So I think like that's the way I positioned it to where
Yeah.
we can get it is I'll be a rater. We have other raters I can train, and we have the patience. So I know that world really well.
Yeah. Which I mean, I enjoyed it because you see the same people all the time. It's great. Especially so my two big indications were Parkinson's and pediatrics. So I was
Ah,
like, those were my bread and butter. And I loved my Parkinson's patients. They were
wow.
all about advancing that medicine and making it better. And it was sad sometimes, like
Yeah.
obviously some people that have it more severe than others, and obviously same thing with the pediatric population, but it was also the most rewarding because of that.
Yeah, those are unique subsets of CNS. My bread and butter was schizophrenia and bipolar,
Hmm.
which are also very unique
Yeah.
individual. I mean, you're talking about people that someday they don't really know what reality is. And
Yeah,
you're in the middle of an interview. And at first, like when I first started to do it, I was like, this person's got to be messing with me, right? Like,
yeah,
but the more of these you do, you're like, no, they actually think. I had one guy, I remember he thought he was Bruce Lee's son. And
yeah,
at first I thought he's joking, so I'm laughing. He's like, no, man, I'm Brandon Lee. And he just kept going on about that. So that was like his thing. That was his delusion.
yeah.
That's really interesting. I think a lot of people, that's another thing we talked about, the academic exodus, like advanced degree holders. They don't even realize that psychiatric sites, CNS sites, they need psychometric raters.
Uh-huh. And that was 100% part of my appeal in moving into that clinical space because I wanted that patient experience. You know, like my end goal at the time was I want to be a psychologist. I want
Mhm.
to work with these people and make them feel better and provide them with this therapeutic outlet. And for me to be able to get experience, I mean, we did an enormous amount of schizophrenia studies, an enormous amount of depression studies, anxiety, like anything that a psychology master student, it was like, you know, like I can interact with all these people at the same time. I don't even have to
Yeah.
be practice or like a specific clinic.
It's such a different world. I think we need like the more of these podcasts we do and the shorts that we do to target these advanced degree holders, to get them out of academia if that's not something they want, I think is a real service to them, to the industry, to patients. I mean, really to everybody. Um, okay, so I'm curious then. You've pretty much mastered like running the site, the operations at the site in about 5 years. Why did you go to Viva?
It was
How did you
like,
even hear about Viva? Because sites don't hear about Viva.
yeah. Actually a few of my coworkers had started working at Veeva. They were not on the coordinator side of things, they were on the quality side of things. So they started working at Veeva. They were like, this is awesome. You need to come work with us.
What's
And
awesome though? Like for somebody running sites and seeing patients, like what's awesome?
just a culture change. Like, I mean, as you can imagine, I was a little stressed,
Get burnt out, yeah.
out. Definitely done seeing patients. You know, I had reached my peak in coordinating. I was ready to move into more of like a project manager role or even moving into like a sponsor space. Just I didn't want to see patients anymore. Like I was
See,
so
you hit that wall I talked about
yeah,
at the beginning. Because
yeah,
I'm the site owner. I can't go to Viva. I could get sponsored by Viva. I love you, Viva, but like I need my staff. I need to figure
yeah.
out how to keep them. Like I need to figure out, Savannah, if you worked for me, how to keep you at my site and not go to Viva. I'm
Good
trying to
luck.
figure this out.
We Veeva is pretty great. I mean, just as any tech company is like, and that was such a different headspace to be in too, like going from being in a clinic and like running across a whole building all day to now sitting at a desk most of my time and working from home. And
Work from home.
yeah.
And you did
um
this in 2020. So did COVID have a lot to do with this?
a little bit. I had left the site space like right before, like literally the week before COVID.
You left
Like
on your own. You're
literally,
like, I'm done. It's too much.
I can't anymore.
Hmm.
I'm cut off.
Yeah.
Stuff off. So then
That
COVID
moment
hit.
alone, that moment alone is like our podcast that we got to do at some point. Part two.
Yep, I'm happy to do it.
Okay.
But yeah, then COVID hit and it actually worked out really great because I obviously didn't have much trouble like collecting unemployment and like making sure that my bills were still paid during that time because I wasn't finding any work, let's be real, during a pandemic.
Those
Um,
first 2 months are brutal. People were
oh
like
my God,
not
and
sure what to do.
it was honestly like the blessing in disguise because I needed that break so badly. I I mean, as much as I wanted to get back into work and get back into like a routine, I needed the break for sure to like come off.
Okay, so like you didn't leave due to COVID. You quit. You resigned a week before, literally a week before COVID. You didn't know COVID was gonna happen. You resigned. You're thinking, okay, I'm gonna take like a few weeks off, get another job, and then boom, pandemic hits.
Now I'm taking months off.
That taking months off. And then so your former colleagues said, hey, you know what? This company Viva's cool and they're hiring.
Yeah, and actually, so the story with Veeva is really interesting too, and I think speaks to their kind of like thought process as a company. So I interviewed for a different position with Veeva in May with someone. Had a great interview. We had great interaction. He was like, I really want you to work with Veeva, but I do not think that this role fits you. Like, they're not just hiring people to hire people. Like, my interview process started in May and I was hired in August, you know?
Wow.
They're vetting you. They want to make sure that you are in it for the right reasons, that like this is some place that, you know, you are going to feel like you're providing value, that you feel valued, that you're really invested in their product, that you're invested in their goals as a company. So yeah, I interviewed in May with someone, didn't get it because it wasn't the right fit, and it absolutely was not, looking back. And then I was offered a role with SiteVault as the product trainer. So I would learn SiteVault and then teach sites how to use it. And that's what I did up until November of 2022. And now I'm more in a consultant space
Wow.
with sites.
So back to your site experience, was the site seemed streamlined, like really streamlined. Did they use any digital platforms? Did they use Viva? Did they use eSource?
So we used eSource because sponsors asked us to use eSource. Like,
Mhm.
there were sponsor specific studies that used eSource.
And the
We
coordinators hated that.
the worst.
Yeah, I know.
The absolute worst.
I know.
Because they only provide you with, you know, 2 tablets, which I get. It's a big investment to hand someone this tablet, especially because I don't know about your sites, but those almost never get sent back.
No, those are terrible. And coordinator, this is why I say like switch if you have the freedom right now to switch to like a system of your choice and you've got something like Site Vault for free, switch.
Yeah,
Right.
do it.
And I know Viva doesn't have eSource yet, but they have enough foresight to figure things out. They could connect the dots. But
Yeah.
like when I was coordinating and we used paper source and sponsor mandated, hey, here's a tablet, you have to use this. We thought it was spyware, and our patients thought it was spyware too. They're schizophrenic. They're like, what are you putting this mic in front of my face for? And it's like, hey, sponsor has to. I mean, these are paranoid schizophrenics
Yeah.
that we're telling them we're recording you.
Yeah.
They already think people are implanting chips in their brains. So it
Well, now
didn't
you're,
make it life a lot easier for us.
oh my gosh, or like the central rated interviews where someone is video calling.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah. Well, I
gone
had
through that.
one guy, he thought we were the CIA. He thought we were like a front for the CIA. And he was like, "Oh, you're gonna make me talk to this guy? You guys are CIA, huh?" And he
You're
was like, kept telling me
like,
that.
are they live?
Yeah, it was so bad. You have to be in that space to understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're helping sites with Site Vault. We're gonna get into that, but you're very passionate about sites pushing back against CRO sponsor mandates. Where
Yeah.
did that stem from? It must have been like one or two key instances where that turned
Yeah.
you onto that role.
So because my site, I think that I just have like a lot of site privilege, if that
You're
makes
you're
sense.
privileged?
Yeah, I came
What do you
from
mean?
really great sites that were really efficient. They knew what they
Ah,
needed to do. They, you know, when an auditor came, they were like, all right, here's what we gotta do. When the FDA called, they're like, all right, everyone lock down, hunker down, we're gonna go. You know, there was no panic. It was
hmm,
not like, oh my God, we have to do all this stuff. So we were
I
very
got you.
streamlined to your point. And I think that like, and I thought about this, I think that my sites also had like big site energy, you know, like they knew that we're doing all this business.
Oh,
And what I like to kind of talk about with sites too is just like in a job interview, they want you to do that study just as much as you want to do that study, right? Like they don't want to keep looking for sites. They want a good site, they want quality data. And if you're saying that you're going to provide that for them, then do that, you know?
hmm.
It
So you,
they don't have to keep looking, and if you do it good the first time, they're going to keep coming back to you, right?
but what are some examples of things you pushed back on
Mm-hmm.
that you think are common? common for other sites to try to emulate if it's appropriate for them?
One thing that I hear pretty frequently through my site vault training experience is like, well, we can't use this because the sponsor wants us to use this template, or they want us to use this software and we already use this software and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, so then don't use it. There are so many instances where the sponsor was like, okay, we have all these templates, we have already written source for you for this study, here you go. And we were like, no, we have our own source that we like, which guaranteed has more information on it than your source. And our IP logs, our pharmacist knows them, they're the same for every study. They record all the data that you're already requesting. Our PK logs, same thing. Like, there were some logs or templates that we used for the sponsor, but most of the time, if we had our own document for it, we were not using theirs because it's just dual work, because we were still going to do our own internal for our SOP. We're still going to have to use our own internal copy for our records. So why am I doing double the work just because you asked me to? And I think too, sponsors are asking you to use these templates and use their source or use this because they're trying to cover their butt in an inspection. But if you're
Yeah.
already inspection ready and your document has been inspected by another, auditor or FDA inspector, then it's a win-win.
Did you guys have a FDA in there like every month?
No, but I think there were three FDA audits when I was there.
Oh, okay, so in the 5-year span, three.
Time only studies.
Yeah, that's actually good. That's pretty reassuring then if you're watching. I mean, you can get audited at any time, even with one study, but they had 100 studies some years, and in Savannah's time there in 5-year period, they've only had 3 FDA audits. So that's not bad. Those are good odds, guys. And I'm guessing you guys were high enrollers in a lot of studies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Before Pfizer stopped doing CNS studies, we were a primary site for them.
I see. So pushback, I get it, the source, you know, but these days the majority of sponsors make you create your own source, I think for the same reason you brought up, like liability. They'll either go one extreme or the other. They'll make their own source, but most of the time they say sites, you make your source. And that's really CYA, so that because I had one sponsor back when I started, a big one. Everybody knows who they are. They created source for all their sites. There was like 100 sites, and then they forgot to put a key point that they needed to capture. And the
Oh,
FDA audit
all
all the sites were using this, so the study was like basically wasted, waste of
yeah,
time.
that happened so many times. I mean, yeah, source is hard.
Source
It's
is
hard.
hard.
It's
It's
hard
really
to write.
hard. It's something that we, especially as a small site, like we have to refine when we discover inefficiencies in it.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like a team effort. So including the CRAs. So what are some other things? Like we had one CRA recently tell us we had a deviation when we thought it wasn't, and the PI thought it wasn't, and the coordinator doesn't know what to do. Like what are, is that another source of pushback?
Oh, 100%. There were very few occasions where I had a CRA that knew the protocol better than I did. Like, not trying to toot my own horn, but I don't feel like now with the workload that CRAs have, they don't know that protocol. You know the protocol. You're the one with the patient. You're the one doing the visit. If you feel like it's not a deviation and your PI is, all about it, what we would do at that point, the PI would reach out to the project manager, copy the CRA on it, and like have an open discussion about it and just say, like, here's why we don't think it's a deviation. Here's what it says in the protocol. Here's what we have recorded. And just kind of get that written that it's
But
not a deviation.
maybe someone's watching from a site, maybe it's me, um, and saying, hey, you know what, Savannah, that's nice, but we're not a big site. We're a startup. We don't want to cause problems or make noise and
I
piss
don't
off
think
the
you're causing
sponsors.
problems though. You're trying to conduct the study as efficiently and with as much quality as possible. I often find that, especially when you go to the project managers or your medical monitor, they appreciate the question. They appreciate you looking into it further rather than just saying, like, all right, well, my CRA told me that I have to do this, so I guess I'm going to do it, you
Yeah,
know?
that's our attitude. The pushback we listen to is when our PI is adamant about something. Like there was one instance, and this is this PI's first study, where he didn't document something properly. And I knew, and so I told the CRA and I told the PI, and PI said, nope, this is how I do it. So he actually just had like a 20-minute discussion with the CRA and they worked it out. But that's the only time that we'll allow pushback, is if our PI wants to do it. Otherwise, as a new site, we feel like, well, this is what the sponsor wants, and at the end of the day, it's what we're gonna do.
I mean, I would recommend at that point, if that's kind of what your internal process is, like loop in the PI. Like anytime, so when we would have monitor visits, our PI would go down at the same day, same time every day,
Hmm.
and talk to monitors and do his rounds basically. And if there had come up in the morning when I was checking in with my monitor, some issue that I felt like was stupid and I didn't want to do it because it didn't make sense,
Mhm.
I would report it immediately to my PI, like, hey, just FYI, the CRA is saying this. I think this. When you go down this afternoon, like, let's go down together and like talk it out. Because I don't think that we should do this. And, you get a certain level of respect from your PI and
Yeah,
from your CRA. Like, you're acknowledging that you know what you're doing.
yeah, yeah,
I think a lot of sites, even the small ones, you know a lot more than you think you do. Like, again, my experience, like kind of looking back now, even when I was a first year, second year coordinator, I knew a lot more than I think that I thought I did.
yep, you do. And whenever you start a new study, regardless of how many years of experience you have in the industry, you're naive to that study, just like
Still in
a
ready.
brand new coordinator. You guys
Yep.
both have a blank slate, new study. You guys both learn the protocol.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I like having engaged PIs, even the ones that are like very really passionate about how they feel. And in most cases, they're actually right, because these are like real world clinicians who
Right.
do these assessments like in real world.
Oh my God, that's my favorite, when the monitor notes something in like a medical history and they're like, that's not how that works. And it's like, are you a doctor?
Yeah, get
I
this. I'm not going to say what study, obviously, but we have a deviation because a patient took vitamin A, right? Just the one you could buy at Sprouts or Whole
Yeah,
Foods.
getting over the counter.
Yeah, that's a deviation because technically the way they wrote the protocol, but they weren't referring to over-the-counter supplements, but they included it in there because they didn't say they're allowed. But they're really talking about prescription class of those drugs.
Right.
I'm not gonna say what it is, but it's
Yeah.
basically vitamin A derivatives. They didn't mean actual like over-the-counter vitamin A, but technically it's deviation. So the PI was arguing about this too, and it's funny because this is like where real world meets research, and there's
Yeah.
like some friction between those two industries or subsets of healthcare. Okay, so it's okay to push back, managing workload. So when you got to Veeva, like, and then Site Vault, so you had to interview again for the Site Vault role, or they
Mhm.
they recommended that you should do that role.
No, so the person that interviewed me at Veeva had recommended me to the person who was interviewing for the site vault role.
Gotcha,
He said,
gotcha.
hey, I interviewed this girl back in May. I think she'd be a really good fit for this role. And then they reached out to me and I did the interview process all over again.
And I'm guessing you never heard of Site Vault at that point.
No. And
And so
actually
what'd you
at
think?
that point, site vault was only like a year old.
Oh yeah, I mean people still don't really hear about. That's why Viva's like sponsoring me, a few other podcasts, because they want to get the word out. But so what did you think when you first heard the concept? Like coming from a site,
I mean,
you had to know the adoption was gonna be tough.
yeah. So I thought like so for most positions at Veeva, you have to do what they call a candidate exercise. So I had to go into the system, learn it, and then present it as part of my interview. So when I was doing that exercise and I was playing around with Siteball, I was like, this is really cool. But also, we used real time at my sites. Like, how is this different? You know?
Or you used real time.
Mhm.
Was it for EREG or just CTMS or what?
EREG. We use
EREG.
clerical
Okay.
conductor for
Gotcha.
more
Gotcha.
CTMS related items.
So how was it that, like, what did you think when you compared in your head to another system you were already using? What were you starting to think about SiteVault?
I I kind of thought like this could be expanded more. Like this is, and as I was doing it, I was like, we should be doing this. I was like giving them notes on their own product.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm the coordinator and this is how this goes and this is how that goes. And then I obviously got the job and then I started giving that feedback to our product team and they're like, no.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? Like I'm telling you, this is how people do it in real work in the real world. And they're like, yeah, but that's on paper. And I was like, so don't you think
Huh.
it should like be the same? And they were like, no. Which I think
Yeah.
is such a beautiful kind of revolution to the industry. Like we're moving into this electronic space, whether it be with SiteVault or whatever other product you're using, you have new things you can leverage now, right? Like you're using e-signature that has a timestamp, just like you did with eSource. If for those of you that had studies with eSource, like if you made a mistake on eSource, are you going to go in and Alcoa and like cross it out, or are you going to let the audit trail do its thing and show like, oh yeah, there was a mistake?
Mm-hmm.
Like the same thing kind of applies here. Like just because you're passing this document around to everyone in the building to sign as proof of oversight or proof of training, you might not have to do that in an electronic system. Like if they went in and like viewed it, you're going to see that they went in and viewed it, you know?
I have a few now that you've been at Viva for what, going on almost 3 years? Wow. So now that you've been at Viva for almost 3 years, you're obviously way more familiar with SiteVault than you were when you started. What do you have to say to coordinators, let's say veteran coordinators? I know many that are watching right now, listening, that say, no, I'm never gonna switch from paper. It's just I trust it. I know what I'm doing. I don't want to change my ways. What what do you say to them?
Even like forget about my Veeva experience, just from my site experience, the industry will shift. There will be a time, just like when EDC went from paper to electronic, there will be a time it's going to get cut off and then you're going to sink or swim.
Mhm.
I
So
mean, to
if
be,
you're gonna retire within the next 5 years, maybe you don't have to worry about it then.
I don't know.
But your next generation, they're coming up.
Yeah, I think it might be sooner than that even.
Wow, you think so? You
Kind
think
of.
you think they do you have like,
They're
I'm gonna
already
put
doing
you on the
it.
spot, but like back of the napkin math, what do you think the numbers are of like sites that are using? I have no clue, but what do you think the number are of sites that have adopted either eReg or eSource?
Definitely in the thousands.
But do you think it's like still less than 50% of sites? Or you think it's close?
I I would be curious to know the actual number because I do think it might be close
I'd be
because
curious too.
I know that sponsors are already electronic.
Hmm.
Like they're not using paper.
Right. They're using ETMFs. So when the sites
Right.
that are using paper, they scan them, right?
Yeah.
So then they get digitized at the sponsor side, but at the site side, they could still be paper.
And I mean, from my Viva background and my Siteball background, I know what our product is doing. And I don't know if you've seen demos or like looked on our website about Study Connect, but that's coming.
Oh yeah.
And that is going to be pushed from sponsors. So even if you don't want to use an electronic regulatory system, you're going to be pushed to use some sort of electronic document exchange. So why not just do it? and then have both.
Why not use your own, get the free one?
Yeah.
The industry, one of the industry leaders as far as vendors is concerned, and get added to that biz dev list. You know how Veeva keeps a list of sites that use SiteVault.
Yeah.
That's for internal purposes only, but sponsors can see, like, hey, this site in Yuma uses it. Oh, okay, maybe they can give them a study. It's just an added benefit, I think. The biz dev part is so underrated.
I mean, I don't want to make this like a sales pitch for Site Vault, but I mean, I obviously like it. I use it
Yeah,
every day. In
we're
my role.
starting to use it. We're starting to use it. I just hired a new coordinator yesterday, and so it's our third one. And we're still going to be using eSource. So we use Creo for eSource, and we've been using Creo for the eReg because it's part of it. But we're going to start using Veeva because it's free. We're going to transition the eReg as a backup first, a backup to our Creo eReg. But ultimately, we might just start using SiteVault because of that Study Connect feature, honestly. I think if enough sponsors adopt that, it's just going to make sense to use that as well.
I mean, it's definitely looking that way. That's sort of like what I was saying. I don't think it's gonna be, 5, 10 years. I think it's gonna be like 3.
Wow, wow. I don't know. I think it's a little longer.
I just think the other side of the industry outside of sites, I feel like are the only ones using paper right now.
Yeah,
Like
they're like Flintstones.
they're just behind the curve, but it will catch up to them.
Yeah. We got to do a part 2 on a lot of these topics, but mainly why you left the site. Because you didn't leave because of the pandemic. You left because of burnout.
Yeah, I was
So maybe we
exhausted.
do one on CRC burnout
Sure.
next. Like I said we can do an hour on that, and I'm super curious about that as somebody who hires and tries to retain staff.
Yeah,
You want
I
to give
have.
them a cliffhanger? What's
Sure.
one thing they could have done differently to keep you?
Um, lessen the pressure, like the enrollment pressure. Maybe instead of making me screen 5 patients a day, maybe just like let me do one every once in a while.
5 a day? Jeez. Okay. By yourself?
We were crushing screens.
5 a day I mean, those psych screenings are like 4 hours.
Yeah.
That's 20 hours of work in a day.
You want to
Wow.
signing an ICF with a Parkinson's patient is 4 hours.
Oh my gosh. That's an example where like e-consent might actually be useful, because you're like clicking instead of initialing, you're just clicking.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, yeah. All right, that's a good cliffhanger, Savannah. We're gonna get into. We need to unpack that for, if nothing else, my own selfish reasons.
This is like my clinical research therapy session.
Therapy, yeah. Let's get it all out, Savannah. Thank you, Savannah. Big things from Savannah. Everybody go check her LinkedIn. The link to her LinkedIn is underneath this video. Thank you so much also for being active on my live streams when I do go live. You're always answering people's
Yeah.
questions about, like, that's really cool. That's how I actually got to know who you are. I'm like, who is this person? I asked Abby and she's like, oh yeah, that's Savannah. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Anytime.
Everybody go connect, like, subscribe, comment, share. Catch you guys later. Stay tuned for part 2. Bye bye.